It's nice to see you.
Good to see you on a Friday afternoon with a snowy backyard in Boulder, Colorado for you, not for me in Florida.
Nope, no, we had like almost maybe 9 or 10 inches earlier this week of snow in Boulder. So tis
Winter's
tis
winter's
snowy.
here, a little early for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we jumped on the live stream here, folks, Margaret and I was reflecting upon a couple of interactions I've had, not so recently, but definitely happens from time to time where people ghost me, go dark, and I might have a proposal out in front of them, and they just don't seem to be able to say no. So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
topic we're going to talk. And maybe you're one of those people out there who have a hard time saying no, and we're going to talk about there is an impact to that, even though you think like you're being kind.
Right. Yeah,
There's an
like
impact.
just to be quiet, or as we talked about, sometimes people, they get so uncomfortable with their no that the impact is they do say no, but they sound really like aggressive or mean or like resentful when they do say no because it's so
Yes.
hard for them. And then if you are the person who is being said no to, then it's like, oh wow, God, I don't know what I did wrong. So that's another impact
Yeah.
that we were talking about. And I will say I used to struggle more with my no. I'm getting much better at it. And I think, there's sort of these two levels. And I know, David, you can, and probably anyone else who's a coach or a self-employed person, when you're, talking to new people and you have a call with them and you spend your time, and then you are asked often by them to follow up with some sort of proposal. So then you spend more time. I should do this in the first person. I do these things. And
Yes.
then it feels to me like my efforts at least warrant an answer. And I always tell people, like, please, I would rather have your no than your silence.
Yeah.
And despite my clarity, at least what I think is clear there, I just can't even tell you how often I get ghosted. Sometimes I talk to them on the phone, I do a proposal, and then I go and I talk to other board members, and then they still ghost me. So now I'm, 2-3 hours of my time has been invested, and they don't even write back to say, like, thank you, but not today. So that's a professional whine rant. But I think the inspiration for today's podcast is, it's a little bit more about the impact of that, not just that it's one of Margaret's pet peeves, but.
Well, there is an impact because it's, you and I talk a lot about integrity, and all that integrity is in a shorthand, definition is a state of being whole and complete. So a bicycle that has spokes, if one spoke is missing, it's out of integrity because it'll wobble and it won't function properly. And this is the same thing in human relationships. When you're incomplete, you're out of integrity, and the relationship wobbles.
Yeah.
And it does harm to the relationship, actually. So that's the we can set aside yours, and anyone else in the audience who, has all kinds of feelings around when you don't get a response and you've invested all this time and energy and effort. And that's a topic for maybe another conversation around positive intelligence. And we might dive into that a little bit. Like, what is it about your patterns that has you being upset? But it is a bit out of integrity, and that triggers me because I get approached very frequently, like for our podcast or like what we're doing here now, to be guests, because Margaret and I have a following out there, and we're both authors, and we're both public figures out on LinkedIn, especially, and people approach us to be on the show, and I frequently say no, but I've learned, and this is where my growth came in this, I had no problem saying no, except I think my no was always very harsh. It was just
Yeah.
like, no.
No.
And
Hang
yeah,
on.
like,
I'm closing
no.
the door. I'm disappearing
Yeah,
for
yeah.
one.
This is what happens when you go live, folks, and you don't have a recording studio.
I know, when you realize like there's noise, there's a lot of noise happening. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've learned to say no in a kinder, gentler, more caring way, more polite way, and still say no. And boy,
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of very nice emails I get back from people when I say no
Yeah.
in a nice way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's very nice. And it makes me think of, when somebody that you know or care about, and I'm happy to say I have not needed to be looking for a job for a while, but when people send in resumes or fill out an application and then it's just silence, like
Right.
forever. And
Yeah.
we used to have the same thing when I worked at the community foundation. We had a very strict adherence to, we responded to everybody who applied to the job.
Yeah.
And like you, I think we were really surprised when people would write and say thank you, even though we had just written to say you didn't get the job.
Yeah.
And because there's something that completes, and it makes them feel at least like you clocked that they applied, somebody maybe read the application and you were closing that loop for them. So they didn't have to wonder, did anybody ever see that I applied? Am I ever going to hear back? I think there's this
Well, there is
spinning
a
black
fear.
hole feeling when you don't ever hear back.
There is a fear. Well, let's get into the fear of why people, before we get into some of the fears of why people don't want to say no, or maybe what are some of the reasons why. I had an incident recently, just to circle back on what you were saying. I had an incident where I had a conversation. Actually, I wrote a proposal to be a speaker at an event. I was invited to write this proposal to be a speaker at an event here in Naples in the new year. And then I wrote the proposal, and then I got on a call with a couple of the executives who were organizing the event, and they wanted more information. But before the end of that call, I asked them very specifically, like, look, would you please just let me know one way or the other? So it's and I got assurances. Oh yes, we'll let you know. And lo and behold, I provided the materials that they asked for, and it's been crickets ever since. And so it just leaves it incomplete for me. Like, that date is approaching rapidly. I'm assuming, so this is what happens when you don't complete things, is that people start making assumptions. Oh, I'm still in the running for that job. No, you aren't. We just didn't respond to you.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm still in the running for that speaking engagement, and I have my calendar blocked. Oh no, we're going with somebody else, but we're not telling you.
Yeah.
So there are impacts. There are impacts.
Well, I mean, and I think that's a very logistical and very real impact. And then I think there are some emotional impacts.
Yes.
Of, how devaluing it feels to,
yes.
Even if you're, let's say again, looking for work, and maybe you've tailored, gone through the time to tailor your resume and your letter for this specific job, like you've invested something in it, and it's not unsolicited, like they posted that they had a job. So then it makes you feel like you're harassing them by wanting a response, or I don't know, there's like this invisible place, I think, that it's just incredibly discouraging to hear nothing.
And we were talking about some people who are uncomfortable with saying no actually feel that they are being harassed when you follow up with them.
Yeah, that's true.
And then when their response does come, it smells of that frustration, anger, or whatever, that annoyance. It smells of annoyance. Right. There it is.
Yeah. and for many people, right, and this comes up so often in my coaching, which I'll get to in a minute, but I mean, I do think for many people, like, the effort of saying no, for some people who struggle to say no, is so great that, like, they come out with their claws and their they over calibrate so hard into being stern and being like,
Right.
I said no,
How dare you follow up with me? It's a no.
How dare you make me say no, which I really would have preferred that you just understood that my silence meant no, but
Right. Yeah,
works.
that's it. That's actually what's going on. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I find, because I do coach people into asking for money, that when you have a fundraiser, an executive director or whatever, who's uncomfortable with their own no, it makes it very hard to ask another person, because you project and you don't believe anybody can just say a clean, easy no. And then they start to feel icky and salesy. They start to feel like the person who's like, what can I get you to do to buy this car? Like, and drive it off the lot today. We're like, they can't fathom or use their imagination to understand that one of their donors or potential donors might legitimately say, like, wow, it sounds like you're doing great work. It's not my thing, or I can't right now. Like, and they're not losing sleep over it. Like, they're fine saying no.
I like what you said about the used car salesman experience, because I do think that's one of the fears. And I will share with you that when I was hiring people at Princeton to work with me, get a lot of resumes, HR would do the initial screening, those who were not even going to be interviewed by HR for qualifications, they would get a no thank you directly from the system, which is fine. I mean, it's okay. And then they would interview some people just on basis of qualifications, and then hand me a very small group of qualified candidates that was my job to do. So they had done some pre-interviews, but even the people that they didn't pass on to me, they told them that they were not moving to the next stage. So that was good. Now, I would get maybe 3 to 5 finalists and interview them all, and only a small so one-on-one, and then a small subset of those, let's say 6, would come back to campus and have a full day of interviews, and maybe come back twice. So anyone who didn't make it past those gates, I personally called. Because I interacted with them, and I knew that to be a person of integrity, I had to make that call. And if you're a person of integrity, you make that call. And I did have a couple of experiences where the candidates wanted to know the why. And if anybody in the audience here has ever been in the business of hiring, you can say very little at that point.
Yeah.
And then you would get like some real resistance on the phone, like to the no, and why I couldn't say more. I just say there are other candidates that are a better fit. Oh, but and then there's the resistance. So I understand that that's an unpleasant. It was unpleasant for me to have to.
Absolutely. And that's why I think the car lot is a great example, because sometimes you say no and the other person doesn't accept your no.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then that's very awkward. I don't know that I had anybody ever push back. I feel like I had some people, though. I mean, their disappointment was so big. And I did the same thing as you, by the way. I had a policy for myself and my own integrity that if somebody came and interviewed and I met them, then they got a phone call instead of an email or a postcard or whatever. And we had the same level of, if I had a phone call with, like, if you just didn't even get anywhere in the process, you'd get a postcard. And if I had a phone interview, like a screening interview, you would get an email if that was a no. But if you had come into the office, I would make a phone call, just like you. Yeah. And I dreaded them, but I did it anyway.
Yes. No, they're hard. You see,
they're hard.
But they are hard. You get, the more you do it, the easier they get, but they never get completely without, at least for me, it was never completely without some nervousness or anxiety, because it's a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah. Well, those hard conversations get sort of supersized in your memory, because really 90+% of the people say, I'm really disappointed, but I appreciate hearing from you. And that was the entirety of the conversation, right? It's pretty benign most of the time, but I think we do supersize, like, how uncomfortable it is
Yeah.
when somebody pushes back, whether it's the car salesman or the job applicant, and you feel like saying, like, it's already a no. Like, do you think being mean to me is going to change my mind into a yes? But we're not allowed to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I that's one of the fears.
Right.
Right.
Is that
And
somebody else
so,
is going to be reactive and they're not going to
yes.
accept your no. Yeah.
Right. That's
It's real. That can really
it's
happen.
real.
But it's not, I don't feel like it's what happens all the time.
No. So let's get into the pleaser saboteur, because that's really what happens most of the time, is that all of us have this mental pattern in some degree or other. So a mental pattern which shows up as behavior, like not wanting to say no. The mental pattern is called the pleaser. It's a saboteur. It's a way we sabotage ourselves in relationships, just for those in the audience who don't know about these characters. But it's really wanting, it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of wanting to be liked and preserve relationship. But it does the absolute opposite. But you're the expert.
Thanks.
Well, I didn't want to be a pleaser.
I am not the expert. No,
I didn't want to be a pleaser and not like just saying it, you know.
I'm gonna name what I have come to understand is yet another component. I mean, yes, to wanting to be liked, but for me, and I think for many, many other people, like being around the energy of somebody else's disappointment is like worse than anything else that you can ask a pleaser to do. You know, to have to feel somebody's disappointment and know that you caused it. I mean, just shoot me now. You know, I'll ghost you till the cows come home, because that is so hard for pleasers. And disappointment, like, it's a big, sticky, thorny, right? It's hard. It is a hard thing to be around somebody's disappointment, as anybody who's ever been a parent knows, right? Like, gosh, what will a lot of parents do to keep our children from being disappointed? We do some pretty insane things.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on in the culture now, I have to admit.
Yeah.
I am not, thankfully, I have a spouse who's sort of on the other side of this from me, and we balance each other out. At least we did in our parenting. So, especially when my hypervigilant, which is another way we sabotage ourselves, gets activated around parenting, and of course my wife is more of a pleaser, and so, you know, I could say no when she couldn't, and but it's a journey, you know. This at any level, at some point you're going to confront the fact that it's hard for you to say no to somebody.
Yeah. I wanted to say one more thing about that disappointment thing, because this is personal growth work to be able to tolerate disappointment, because it's very hard to say no. And sometimes we end up saying yes to things that are really a bad idea to have said yes to, right? Which is a more extreme. I don't even mean like ghosting the person who applied for the job or ghosting the consultant who sent in it, right? I mean, this is more interpersonal stuff with relationships that are present and that matter to us, and that inability to say no because you're so afraid of disappointment leads to some very big consequences sometimes for people. And I figured out somewhere along the line, you know, like, I couldn't tolerate my own disappointment. So then there was no way that I could be with anybody else's disappointment, you know?
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, disappointment is heartbreak. And when you can't be with your own heartbreak, then the pleaser gets born, because you don't want anyone to feel disappointment. So you say yes rather than no, or you don't say no because you don't, even though the person's going to be disappointed anyway, but you refuse to say no, right?
Figure out sooner or later that they didn't get the job. Yeah. And
exactly. So that is one of the impacts on ourselves of saying, you know, of not saying no.
Yeah.
There's an impact there.
And it's
But there's an impact
100%
on other people when you don't
right.
say no. So there's two sides to this coin.
Yeah. Well, and it starts like with your own thing, and then you go ahead and like, ooze your ick onto other people because you can't do it yourself.
Yeah. So what are we saying here? What do we want the audience to do if any of this sounds familiar or to them? What would we advise, Margaret?
Yeah. I mean, I think just really, ghosting feels like such a little temporary way to avoid something unpleasant, but it's really shitty. Like, it's such a terrible, nobody wants to be ghosted for any reason, so close the loop, even though it's hard. That's what it means to be a good human being. Sometimes you do hard things, including
certainly in the realm of leadership. I would say, again, if you consider yourself to be a leader who has integrity as a quality of leadership, then I assert it's incumbent upon you to close those loops. Otherwise, you're out of integrity with yourself and with the other people that you haven't said no to.
Yeah. I'm going to put a loophole out there for myself, which is when I say yes to a connection request on LinkedIn, and then I suddenly get a sales personal message with somebody, which feels like a bot most of the time. And then I'm like, I don't feel like I owe this person, a closing of the loop.
Yeah, I would agree with that caveat, especially on LinkedIn, because there is very little skill that I see, because I get approached all the time, and now I just decline those invitations. I used to accept them all, but then I'd immediately get a sales message, and this is not how you build a relationship. As someone who reaches out to people frequently on LinkedIn, I offer value first. And it's so interesting because, in fact, lately I've been offering our free saboteur assessment, like the way people can understand how their pleaser sabotage. Like, that's just, you take this assessment, it takes 5 minutes, it's quick, it's easy, it's impactful, it's free.
Right.
And I offer them, like, I'll debrief it with you, like, no charge. You don't have to work with me. This is just part of what I do as part of my being a positive intelligence coach and giving value back to the world. And if you want to work with me, great. But if you don't want to work with me, you got value. So few, like 0 people have taken me up on this because they're being completely
down,
poisoned. Yeah.
I think that's true. Yeah. I mean, at this point, yes, there are many requests. I'm like, I know where this is going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't blame anyone who just, so if you're out there in the audience,
we're in a rabbit hole.
No, actually, this is apropos. If you're out there in the audience and you get an invitation from me and you just ignore it, I promise not to take it personally.
Okay, fair enough. Don't take it personally. But if, on the other hand, I speak with you live, I write a proposal, I go to your board meeting to answer questions, and then you ghost me, like, now I'm going to feel a little salty about that. Well, and I don't even need you to say yes. Like, really, I'm a big girl. Like, I understand all the reasons people say no. I just need you to say something. So
well, I think that's
kind of the message.
Because if you're if you're a leader in an organization, executive director, president, CEO, cabinet level person, and you're inviting someone to, talk with you, have conversation with your board, invite the proposal, and then you ghost. This is a tarnish on your reputation as a leader. It is a tarnish. And you just don't want that. Like, just close the loop with people, because your reputation, I know you think like, oh, that's difficult for me to do. And, for all the reasons that we talked about, but the impact on you and your reputation is greater when you do not close that loop. This is what we're saying.
Yeah. I mean, may or may not be true, but like it doesn't even have to be a jerky no. It can be, like we loved meeting you. It seemed, you can say this to a job candidate, right? Like
Yeah,
you actually can say something nice
right.
also to them at the same time. It doesn't have to be a one-word email. No,
Right.
right.
That is a skill that I have improved as a high D on the disc. I have embodied more S in my nose,
Excellent.
my more
Yeah.
S style. A warm no
Yeah.
always goes over better than a sharp no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
People understand like it's not the right time
Yeah.
or you're not the right
And
person.
And if you find that you have one of the saboteur called the pleaser and would like to work on it, reach out to one of us. We promise not to ghost you as long as you don't ghost us after we have our conversation.
Yeah, no, yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this time, folks. Take it easy and